Good afternoon and welcome to the Cyber Agony Uncles for Tuesday the 1st of October. I'm Uncle Stevie.
And I'm Uncle Rich. Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, Rich. You've got such a good question for us this time, haven't you?
I really have. So, the question this time is, I'm responsible for budget at one of your competitors. Hush, hush. I'm responsible for allocating security practitioners onto projects for our customers. I'm also a senior security VCSO myself, so not only am I delivering billable work, I oversee the other FTE consultants and make sure they are doing billable work correctly. So many of them aren't good. The business has hired graduates with absolutely no work ethic, and I find it hard to resist parachuting in and doing the work myself to fix the problems they're creating. I'm absolutely exhausted. When I go to the business to discuss this, they make out like it's a problem with my leadership style, but trying to get work out of these grads is like trying to get blood out of a fucking brick. What do I do? And there's also a PS on there. May I also clarify that customers do not know that these are grads. They think they're senior security practitioners. But I'm the only senior, and I feel like I'm the proxy for everyone's knowledge. Wow, what a great question.
That is a superb question. Well, welcome to the world of the majority of suppliers, I think. Oh dear. I mean, one of the reasons Eliza and I set up that security company was because that sort of stuff we didn't think was okay. However, apart from the obvious, oh dear, never mind, you carry on doing a bad job because that helps us. What can we say?
Well, I think it is difficult, and there's been numerous articles written about managing this new up and coming generation of grads.
Yeah,
and quite frankly, a lot of them seem to be very disparaging about them, which is unfortunate because those that I've met have actually been really good, quite smart, quite capable.
yeah.
But a lot of them, is a double-edged sword. They are new grads. They're not going to have the sort of corporate experience that you might want, the company, the work experience
No.
that you might hope for. So they might well need some additional guidance.
Yeah, I think the way the big four consultancies have always dealt with this is yes, they take on graduates, but they aim to get smart people with a certain amount of aptitude, and they've then just basically proceduralized absolutely everything. So you can use that as an approach. That doesn't always work if the engagements that you're putting people into are very bespoke engagements. I know the big four have got they're very clever at shoehorning their solution into your problem. So that kind of gets around us a little bit. But well, yeah, what would we do? What would we do under those circumstances? I think actually what we would do is train and support people until they were good. Let's look at it this way: there is like the psychology of getting a job done. The vast majority of people want to do a good job. They, at the end of the day, they want to feel like they've done a decent amount of work. They've succeeded in things that, they're, in this case with the service organization, their customers are happy with what's happening, what's going on. They don't want to feel like they've done a bad job. So you've got to look at reasons why people don't do a good job. And I think by far the most common category of not getting it quite right is the one that I've always called doesn't know what good looks like.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that some of these graduates have no idea what good actually looks like. They will think in terms of their experience to date. So, they might well have written a huge dissertation for their degree and think that a written report has to be like that. Yeah. But actually, language choices, terminology are all bound to be different. Brevity, even an element of humor potentially, the tone will quite possibly be completely different. One of the things that I do, and I'm potentially giving away some of the secret sauce, but I'll share it anyway, is when we have a new joiner, I bore them to tears for a good solid hour with a presentation that I called How to Win at Work. So it kind of sets behavioral expectations, right from the basics, like turn up to meetings on time,
Yeah.
have an agenda in your meeting requests, make sure you're online on Slack, the basics like that. But also things like make sure you've got a good grasp of written English, because you could be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't communicate your thoughts, no one's going to listen to you. You'll have no influence.
Yeah.
And people will just assume that you're bad at your job, even if you're not. So it's full of tiny tips and tricks like that, which was kind of the idea that it would give people shortcuts to success. Things that I had to learn and go around the houses to learn over time.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting, because I know there's, as you say, there's a lot of talk at the moment about people are coming out of university and very badly prepared for the world of work. But I can absolutely hand on heart say it was no better. Certainly back in the 80s when I was at university, it was no better. At that point, school didn't prepare you for the world of work. University didn't prepare you for the world of work. You just worked and learned as you went along with these things. So I don't think that anything's got any worse. I just think that it hasn't got any better. And I think there is also there is, I think, a difference in the expectations around what requires a graduate and what a graduate should be able to do. I mean, it's something approaching 50% of under 20, whatever it is, year olds, school leavers go to university now, whereas back in the day it was only like a very small percentage, a few percent. So you kind of got everybody is coming out of university, they've got a degree of some sort. Not everybody, but a large number of people are coming out of university, they've got a degree of some sort. Not all of those people have actually got aptitude to do work at the sort of level which 40 years ago you would have considered to be graduate level work. And I think we've sort of lost that knowledge about there is, and that comes down also to, I'm not being very articulate today, but there's also a piece around recruitment in there. I mean, there was a time when you would say, okay, I only want graduates, because you were actually looking for that top 5%. But you're now saying, I want a graduate because you're looking for the top 50%. Do you see what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
It's the distribution curve hasn't changed shape. You've just moved the boundary towards the median. So, which I know that statement in itself, I'm sure, will annoy a great number of people. But you can't really say. Well, in fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm not particularly bothered about whether people have got a degree or not when they come to work for us. It's much more important from my perspective that we're getting people who've got aptitude. Rather than people that have got specific qualifications, because their qualifications probably won't align 100% with what we need anyway. So we're still going to have to train them in the way that we want things done and the stuff that we see as mattering, which comes from a combination of many decades of experience within the company about what actually matters in cybersecurity and information security from a customer's perspective. So the issue probably isn't that you would expect more from graduates. I think the issue is you're employing people that don't know how to do the job properly, and it does sound like you're then not telling them either how to do the job or what the outcomes of what a good outcome is, and then letting them work out how to get to a good outcome. Either will do.
Yeah, exactly. And I sense a lot of frustration in the person that poses questions in their use of language. They're saying there's absolutely no work ethic in these graduates. But Again, that might be an unrealistic expectation. You're not. People aren't born with a strong work ethic. Yes, there's nature versus nurture. Admittedly, there's always that argument about anything, regard when it comes to people. But again, a work ethic is something you have to learn. I look back to my earliest jobs, and if I'm being completely honest about it, I wouldn't be able to put my hand on heart and say I worked as hard as I possibly could. I, I worked as hard as I thought was needed. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I tried to do all the jobs I was told. And obviously, when you're very junior, you get a lot of jobs. You get told to do a lot of different things, but it's very much task based. And but I don't think I worked anywhere near as hard as I do now. Put it that way.
No, I think there's, I think that's, I think that's quite normal. Especially as you pick up responsibilities, you find that you do need to, put more in, but you get more out. So that's okay, and it's
Yeah,
like that's just part of learning the world of work. I think one of the things that is perhaps a little bit of a red flag in this question is the temptation to parachute in and do the stuff,
yeah,
and that something I've learned over the last 25, 30 years is that there are many things that I can look at and be fairly confident I could do as good a job, if not a better job, than some of the people that might be doing those things for me. However, I can't do everybody's job to that level. So, I think the largest departments I've looked after were cascaded down to about 50% of the that particular organisation. You know, there is no possible way I could have done every one of those jobs concurrently, as to even a vaguely acceptable level. So there is a point at which you have to delegate. There is a point where you have to look at it and say, well, okay, is it good enough? And if it is good enough, don't focus on that bit for the moment. You can move quality up once you've when you've dealt with the outliers, the things that are really an issue. You can then begin, and you have to move that up relatively slowly because you've got to bring a whole team of people along with you. But the
yeah,
thought of, person X, I put them into this particular consultancy and they've done a really bad job. I should have just done it myself. Well, that's fine. But if you're doing that, then nobody else is looking after all of your other consultants in all of the other jobs. So you're kind
yeah,
of saying, well, I'll just demote myself back down to that level again because that's where I'm comfortable working. So there is a leadership problem there.
yeah. Absolutely, and it can come from fear,
Yeah.
fear of letting the junior members fail in some ways.
Yeah, helping them to manage failure, I think, is very important. One of the concepts that I know you and I work on quite hard with the team is around building enough trust within the team that people can bring their failures to you or to us without fear of unless they've done something absolutely stupid, like hit the CEO around the head with a laptop or something like that. They're not going to get marched out of the door just for having got something wrong. So the first question to ask when things aren't right is, how can I help get things right? And once you can get that culture of, okay, appreciate that something you're responsible for hasn't gone right, is there anything I can do that will help that, help get this back to good again? And then we can spend some time later looking at how do we end up in this situation and how would we avoid ending up in this situation in the future. Now that is, I think that shows, that's a style of leadership which I've found to be very productive, but remarkably rare.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that a lot of leaders could do with remembering is that if you parachute yourself in, your team learn nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
They don't learn the resilience around recovering from a failure.
No.
They don't. They'll never improve their own performance or their own process involved in getting from point A to point B because they know that you'll just jump in and do it for them. It's very much like having kids in that regard. You know, you,
Yes.
I've got relatively young children, and my daughter a few years back wanted to learn how to make a cup of tea. Now, there's a very real risk that she could get burnt, but you've got to stand near her and talk her through it and help her with it, but don't touch anything, so that
Yeah.
she has the opportunity to learn how to do it without burning herself.
Yeah. I mean, it's risk assessed, isn't it?
It is, yeah,
You know, and I think that's absolutely right. If you're trying to help somebody develop as a consultant, you've got to put them in a situation where they're a bit stretched. But you also got to be on top of it enough to know that if it is going to end up as being a mess, you can step in there before the customer, has a problem with it. But equally, if you're not delegating it, it will never get done for you. It was an interesting analogy going back to when I worked in financial services many years ago. Um, the team I was working in at the time was sort of infrastructure architecture team. Um, and the manager of that team would hand out tasks willy-nilly, but most of them involved, write me the design for this, write me a policy for that kind of thing. And I looked at the quality of the stuff that was coming out from the team, and it was really poor. I mean, not just substandard, it was like truly poor. And I asked them why, because it's clearly they were a bunch of very clever people. And I asked them why. And they said, "Well, look, it doesn't matter what we put on the page because this particular manager, you could spend a week writing the perfect design for something that takes into account all the risks, all of the benefits, the whole piece. You write it all out. You would hand it up to the manager." Who would then immediately just cross it all out with red pen and scribble all over it. And so the whole team had learned that there was no point in putting any effort into anything because no matter how good it was going to come back and you'd have to redo it anyway. So in order to find out what it was you should have written, you might as well just put 2 lines on a piece of paper and hand it over, and then find that scribbled out with loads of red lines all over it, and the actual ideas that should have been on the page written down for you. So we did end up in that particular organisation. The only person that actually did anything at that level was the manager himself. But his idea of delegating was to give something to somebody, be disappointed with it, and then do it himself anyway. It was really demoralising. It was absolutely horrible.
yeah. I mean, so going back to this question of is it a leadership problem? Because the person that wrote this question is saying that they go back to their leadership and who are saying it is a leadership problem with him or her. And I think we've probably settled on the concept that it generally is. And it seems that the person has tarred all of these graduates with the same brush. Doesn't single out anyone for being better than the rest or anything like that. So it's almost like they've made a sweeping generalization that all graduates are bad. And that can't be the case. The law of averages, if nothing else says otherwise.
I think there's an interesting point there as well, though, that culture cascades from the top of an organisation.
Yeah.
And so if there is a problem at this level, it's probably because there are more significant problems above this person.
Yeah, that's quite likely, actually, isn't it?
So whoever this is, the people above them, this person's line manager is not listening to the issue. So to punt it back down, saying, "Well, that's just your problem, deal with it," is kind of, that is perpetuating the issue. It's like, you're telling me things aren't going particularly well. I'm telling you, well, just work it out. Well, how am I supposed to learn what good looks like and implement that and cascade that through my organisation if you're not helping me? Because you're more senior, so I'm relying on you to help me deal with issues. I've brought to you a problem, and you're saying, "Well, that's I don't care. That's not my problem. Well, that's the absolute antithesis of the "what can I do to help" approach, which is the one that gets the best out of teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, frequently I've been reporting into sort of C-level execs who don't really want to help. They just want you to get on with it and don't bring them any problems. And that kind of loses the mentorship sort of relationship that's quite important at every level. Because you want that flowing all the way up to the board if they're accessible, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, ideally, you want sort of line of sight of the vision, so that you know how your bit fits in. It just doesn't. It feels like this particular organisation has got some fundamental problems at the top that are cascading down through the organisation, but they're probably fairly successful. I mean, you look at the number of, quite frankly, not great cyber vendors out there in the consultancy or in the sort of hardware software space, and because there's so much to do, the drive for quality has not really, it's not eliminating substandard organizations. I think
Yeah,
it will. And cyber, to me, feels like it sort of lags behind the rest of IT. And so some of these things you don't see anything like as often now on the sort of IT infrastructure side as you did maybe 20 years ago.
no, exactly. But yeah, I must say I can't get on board with this other company's way of shoving graduates out and selling them as senior consultants or senior.
No, I mean, it's absolutely. We use people from like first jobbers right the way through to some very experienced people, but we're using them in roles that are appropriate to their skills and experiences and aptitudes. And we certainly wouldn't put somebody in who's really truly junior and pretend that they're not, and that would just be ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it looks like Eliza commented via YouTube that it's not the graduates' fault that the business is shoving them out as faux senior engineers.
No,
There's a very strong chance that the work that they're being asked to do is actually a bit too much of a stretch, too far beyond their current skills.
yeah, it's highly possible, but because we've established that there does appear to be a top-down leadership problem, nobody is doing anything about it. Would be my so I don't know. I mean, what would our recommendations be? Well, if you can't fix the people above you, at least try to fix the people that work for you. So give them, if spot anybody who has got some aptitude, and give them a bit of coaching, help them through, encourage some good team behaviors. If they're stuck, if they don't know what to advise or what to do in a particular environment, create an internal team environment where they can bring that stuff back. Begin to have some team meetings. Get them all to dial in on a Friday afternoon and talk about how their particular engagement's going and see whether anybody else has got any good ideas. That sort of thing. Just try to get the best out of the people that you have got, or alternatively, if the whole organisation is that broken, well, you may consider not doing it for that organisation anymore.
We can't recommend that on every cyber hacking uncles. We won't get away with it much longer.
No, that's quite true, actually. Yeah,
but there is something I did want to briefly touch on. I don't know if the person who asked this question has ever heard of this, but the concept of managing upwards.
Yeah.
Now, to me, it smacks a little of political game playing, and I hate politics in any business. Do my best to stamp on it as it starts, but actually, reading up on that might give them some tips on how to interact with their senior managers.
Yeah.
And goals-based tactics and approaches. If they're open to risk assessments, do one on the services that the junior, I say juniors, they're being sold as seniors, aren't they? That the graduates are working on, and try and perform some sort of analysis, see if that approach works. But I would say, yeah, exactly what Stephen said. I'd echo that 100% on looking after and fostering a culture of collaboration and being able to fail safely. um,
Yeah.
within that team of graduates. But yeah, equally keep plugging away at the senior management. Try some different approaches and see if you can get anything achieved there.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I mean, if you see politics as rather than being de facto negative, it's really the art of influence.
Yes.
Then then yeah, there is probably scope for at least trying to improve matters by being a little more political, working upwards. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not talking about dodgy manoeuvring and posturing. That's the stuff I can't get on board with. But communicating clearly and extending your sphere of influence where necessary, absolutely. But yeah, not true politicking.
No, that was I thinking that politics was all about getting somebody else to buy you designer clothes and pay for tickets to Taylor Swift. But never mind. Um, and I think on that note, we've probably covered this one, haven't we?
I think we have, yeah. I think that'll do this. We're coming up to the half hour anyway, so
Great. Look, thank you all for listening, and hope that's been useful. It's certainly I certainly saw that as a rather inspiring question, a rather interesting question to go through. Hopefully, yeah. So hopefully you got something out of it. And then yeah, we shall be back next month, I think, with this. So that's goodbye from me.
and it's